BBC World Service. The BBC World Service CFO sits on the 5th floor. The BBC World Service CEO sits on the 5th floor. The BBC World Services transmissions run from the 5th and the 6th floor. They only had initially the 5th floor, but now they have the 5th and the 6th. So all the regional languages and English, which has any operations in India, only and only runs under one wing, one umbrella, that is the BBC World Services, and that is being scrutinized. The survey is happening on the BBC World Services functions in India. And that is why we see, because they do not have a separate corporate office and a separate editorial office, the Income Tax Department during their survey, which is on right now on the 5th and the 6th floor, had to resort to this, that they had to stop any kind of digital movement inside the office, and hence the mobile phones, the smartphones, everything was temporarily switched off, and their employees who were inside at that very point of time, because no particular editorial employee has been questioned at this point of time. Let's be very clear in specifying that the Income Tax Department has its jurisdiction and is only looking at the books, the financial transactions of the BBC World Service. And when we mention BBC World Service, it mentions all their 14, 15 languages in which transmission happens, and their headquarters in India is this. They have a parallel office in Mumbai. They also have a small office in Bangalore. They used to have an office in Kolkata, which now they have switched off and now have brought all their regional services up here on the 5th floor. So at this point of time, what is happening is that the corporate office of the BBC World Service, which coincides with the BBC World Service's editorial office, is being looked, and the survey is on by the Income Tax Department, which is on right now. And once again, we repeat, all the regional services and the English service transmission, majority of which is radio. Majority of which is radio, that is shortwave transmission, is being surveyed at this point of time, because their corporate office is also on the same floor. So basically what they are doing is, the notice which was sent at least a year or more prior is now being looked into, because there was no response back, and basically whoever is trying to connect this with that controversial documentary, what we are being clearly told by our sources, is wrong. And it's completely wrong, because they say that this has nothing to do with the editorial work of the BBC World Service, and only with the financial transactions, with the movement of money, with whatever has to do, and their books are being looked into. No editorial content of the BBC is being surveyed or looked. Even minusculely, they are not even looking at the editorial stuff. They're only looking at the financial transactions. And it happens to be that their corporate office is on the same floor. They do not have a demarcation. It's the same office which has of the corporate and the editorial. And hence, as we speak, on the 5th and the 6th floor of the Hindustan Times building here at Kasturba Gandhi Marg, the survey is on of the Income Tax Department. The officers are still in. The employees, and including the editorial employees of the BBC who were inside, are inside. Who were out have not been allowed to enter, and those who were inside, they have been very clearly and specifically told, Shavan, that they are not allowed to use their digital instruments, including the mobile, including the laptop and their iPad. So yes, that is the latest coming in. But the World Service transactions are being looked into. Yeah, back to you.
Well, just more details now coming in with regards to the searches that are basically underway. That's once again, we're being told that the price regulations, remember, with the regional operations expanding over the last few years, it turns out that the price regulations norms haven't really been followed by the BBC, and that is the reason why they are now looking into whether at all there is any aspect of tax evasion. While there is absolutely no mandate that the Income Tax Department has with regards to looking into other operations of the BBC, it is primarily to do with the financial services. They're looking at whether at all there has been any sort of violation in terms of their expansion and the money that was being received by the parent company, and how exactly the money was being pumped into the other services, and whether at all any sort of tax evasion that has essentially taken place. We are now getting you live images from outside the national capital, the office of the BBC in the national capital, as well as in Mumbai. We'll try and quickly go across to our colleague also in Mumbai, where the survey operation is underway. We'll try and go across to our Mumbai reporter also, but before I go across to Alicia, let me also once again go back to Aishwarya for the latest details. But a quick recap before I do so, and for all our viewers who are tuning in right now, what exactly has transpired over the last few hours. Roughly around 11 o'clock is when an indication came.
What happens is, Shavan, that we need to understand the function.
Is the fact that there was, more importantly, the survey that started. The survey was with regards to 3 teams. In fact, 3 teams of the Income Tax Department are currently present. The composition of the team is not known at this point in time, but a rough estimate of roughly about 60 to 70 is what we are being told. The number could very well vary because there hasn't been any official statement that has been issued. But as far as the survey operation is concerned, what we are being indicated right now, this basically includes the examination of the book of accounts and with regards to the tax payments that have been made so far. Let me also quickly bring in my colleague Aishwarya, who's giving more details. Aishwarya, over to you for more details.
Shavan, BBC World Service does not act like any other media organization. It is not a privately owned organization. It runs on the Queen's Pound. And the BBC World Service also acts as an NGO. So we need to understand that there has been a Government of India crackdown on the NGOs for the last 3 years. 3.5 more years. So what happens is that because BBC World Service does not only act as a normal private-owned media organization, it runs on the Queen's Pound and it also takes donations and international donations. So what we are being now clearly told is that very, very clearly the problem or the doubt which the Income Tax Department had, for which they had sent a preliminary notice to them also as long as a year back, was regarding certain funds which came from overseas to the BBC World Service and how have those funds being utilized. So that's the latest which is coming in. We need to tell this to our viewers that BBC World Service takes donations. BBC World Service also acts as an NGO, and then in turn they do their work. So at this point of time, there was certain discrepancy, there were certain specific questions which were asked to them by the Indian authorities, by the Indian Income Tax Department, to which a satisfactory answer was not given. And hence, when a notice was sent back to them, they have not reverted back, and hence we see that a survey is on. Once again, I repeat, a survey is on the 5th and the 6th floor of this building, because once again, I repeat, this is not related to any editorial content. This is not related to any controversial documentaries, because we have certain political sections commenting to it, reacting to it, and then connecting it to that controversial survey. We have Mehbooba Mufti reacting, and then so on and so forth. But the fact remains that we need to understand the functioning of the BBC World Service, including the English, for which the transmission goes from India, including those regional services